A presidential candidate in the United States by the name of Robert F. Kennedy has just completely changed the game. He has announced that he wants to back all of the US debt with 1% hard money. So he actually said platinum, silver, gold, and Bitcoin. And today I'm going to run the numbers for you guys about what a world could look like where all of the US debt is backed 1% by Bitcoin. So let's get straight into this one. We all know that the United States has $32 trillion of debt around the world. Let's suppose that 1% of this debt was backed with Bitcoin. Let's just keep our maths equation a little bit more simple for demonstrative purposes. So let's assume a 1% backing of all of the $32 trillion of US debt. That would actually represent a demand for Bitcoin of $320 billion. Okay, so that's pretty nice. Bitcoin today has a market cap of around $600 billion. So this hypothetical scenario where the United States has to back all of its current debt by 1% with Bitcoin, that would represent a pretty nice gain for Bitcoin. It would increase its market cap by around 50% if we assume that for every $1 demand for Bitcoin, it pushes the market cap up by $1. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Bitcoin multiplier effect later on into today's video, but let's extrapolate this out a little bit because the United States is also going to have a lot of future debt, okay? The United States government themselves are even saying that by the year 2050, they're going to have tens of trillions of dollars of more debt. And they already today have $150 trillion of unfunded liabilities. So these are promises that they have actually promised their population in the form of Medicare and Medicaid that has to be paid. So when we're talking about future debt, I really want to show you this great chart that really compares the difference between how much debt the United States has today as opposed to how much debt they're going to have to pay in the future in all of these paper promises that they have promised their population. And you guys can see the future debt dwarfs the present debt. And in the future, it is estimated, many people have actually suggested, that the United States owes over $160 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So this is where things get a little bit interesting. If all of that future debt has to be backed with 1% of Bitcoin, suddenly you have $1.6 trillion of demand for Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is only a $600 billion market cap asset, and there is a limited amount of coins available for sale. A really interesting chart that I'm going to show you guys actually shows that 78% of the Bitcoin has not moved in the last year, okay? Now, let's imagine there is only 2.1 million Bitcoin sitting on an exchange. What if the United States, only the United States, wants to actually back all of their debt with a 1% Bitcoin backing? This is present and future debt. Well, we would actually have somewhere around $2 trillion of demand for Bitcoin just from the US government debt. Okay, remember we have that $320 billion from the current debt that needs to be 1% backed by Bitcoin. And then we also have future debt, which of course is 1.6 trillion. Add those together and you're nearly at $2 trillion of demand for Bitcoin. So let's stay a little bit grounded and a little bit conservative, and let's just look at how much demand for Bitcoin there would be if the United States government wants to back all of their present debt with Bitcoin. So that again is $32 trillion of debt. That's $320 billion of demand for Bitcoin. With Bitcoin at around $30,000 a coin, that would actually represent the US government wanting to buy 10 million Bitcoins, over 10 million Bitcoins. And again, remember, there is only 2.1 million Bitcoins sitting on exchanges for sale. So even this small demand from one country completely buys all of the Bitcoin at $30,000 a coin. So in this hypothetical scenario, what happens is the price of Bitcoin has to go a lot higher for the United States government to be able to back their debt with a 1% Bitcoin holding. So that's the conservative debt, but I nearly forgot. Let's run the numbers on the future debt obligations, and let's look at what happens if America actually has to back all of its future debt with Bitcoin. So let's assume, okay, we have $160 trillion of unfunded liabilities. Let's assume America has to go into an extra $160 trillion of debt to actually fund those unfunded liabilities. Now, I think that is actually conservative considering the budget deficits America is actually running today and the fact that real GDP hasn't actually grown in the past 20 to 30 years. If you look at those real GDP numbers and not the manipulated nominal GDP metric. So let's do some maths. Let's assume there's $160 trillion of future debt. all of that's backed by Bitcoin, that would represent $1.6 trillion of demand for Bitcoin coming just from America, okay? Now, let's remember, when America wanted to back all of its current debt, so 32 trillion with a 1% Bitcoin holding, that represented America buying 16 million coins at today's price of 30,000 Bitcoin. Remember, there's only 21 million Bitcoins. So if America actually wanted to back all of its future debt with Bitcoin, this would represent $1.6 trillion of buying demand for Bitcoin. And we can do some really simplified maths. Now, the maths actually works out really nicely for this one. I didn't plan it this way at all, but again, America would be buying 16 million Bitcoins at today's price of around $30,000 if it wants to back all of its current debt with Bitcoin. Now, in the future, imagine if we have a $1.6 trillion demand for Bitcoin. This would mean if the Bitcoin price stayed at $30,000, America would need to buy more than 80 million Bitcoin to back all of that future hypothetical $160 trillion of future debt, okay? And now, obviously, a lot of people would be scratching their heads right now saying, hang on a minute, there's only 21 million Bitcoin. And furthermore, there's only 2.1 million Bitcoin sitting on exchanges for sale. America needs over 80 million Bitcoins to back all of its future debt obligations by Bitcoin. So obviously, there's not enough Bitcoin to go around. If America wants to do this, the price of a Bitcoin is going to be much higher than $30,000. Now, before we get into the really bullish hypotheticals that you guys know I love to run on this channel, I just thought it'd be really interesting to mention that RFK's uncle, who of course was assassinated in 1963, also actually wanted to return America to its foundations. He signed an executive order in June of 1963 that would have actually enabled the American country to begin issuing silver-backed certificates, or a silver-backed money, okay? And that is very interesting because only 6 months after that executive order, RFK was, of course, assassinated. So I'm not going to draw any dots or draw any conclusions for you guys. I just think it's a really cool connection that his nephew is actually once again trying to return America to its foundations, and that is built upon hard money. The founding fathers in the 1770s also wanted America to remain on a hard money standard, okay? So now let's get into the realm of speculation. Let's begin to think about what happens if other countries around the world also want to back their government debt with a 1% Bitcoin holding. Because naturally, if the United States makes this move, other countries around the world are going to have to do the exact same thing, especially if the Bitcoin number go up technology continues, okay? Because all of a sudden, if Bitcoin continues to gain adoption and it continues on this rapid and aggressive monetization path, all of a sudden, the United States government debt is going to look more and more attractive. So all around the world, you have tens of trillions of dollars of debt in all of these different governments. And what happens if they all want to take a 1% allocation to Bitcoin like America has? Well, let me give you guys a small hint, okay? The price of a Bitcoin is not going to be in the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars a coin. It's not even going to be in the single-digit millions per Bitcoin. The price of a Bitcoin would be much, much higher. And this dovetails into a really interesting paper that we recently covered here on the channel. BlackRock quietly published a research report in 2022, and they actually said the optimal asset allocation for Bitcoin is 85%. So what happens if the rest of the world rebalances their assets to actually chase that optimal asset allocation that the world's largest money manager is recommending and saying is optimal? Or what even happens on a more conservative level if the world's government debt wants to back itself with a 1% Bitcoin backing? Well, I explore both of those questions in a recent video. If you want to check that one out, you can find that one right there. And with all that said, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next one.